Good morning. Welcome to the Lancaster County Wetland Board. I'd like to welcome all here, and I'll introduce as procedure. Everyone I think knows everyone, but to my right is Brian Barnes and Hannah Smith, right? To my left is Jay Woodward from VMRC. Over to my left is Crystal Way over here, and Glenn, of course, Rowe is doing all of our technical. To my left is Will Tones and Cecil,
Big,
whatever,
little.
Little. And to my right is Bruce, Julian, and Andy Ransom, and I'm Edna Revere. With that said, I'd like to call our first applicant, please. David, is it Scavo? And Matthew Bykema. Are you gonna do one at a time, Brian?
Yeah, we think that you guys should take two separate votes, since they
Okay,
are two
okay,
separate
okay.
VMRC
I
numbers.
just wanted to clear.
Your vote will probably be the same, that's fine, but just make two different motions and two different votes.
Okay. But, go ahead, state your name for the record, please.
Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive in Eastville, Virginia. Representing both of these cases, we can deal with Daniel Shabo first. Hopefully you're in possession of a revised drawing, which, based on our field inspection on Tuesday, I mentioned that we had a desire to, am I speaking now? To angle the breakwater over on the Shabo's property. I think that he's lived there for several years, and he has a very intimate knowledge of the wave action there in front of his property. And he said, based on his experience with these northeast storms that we get, that this would offer the best protection for the sand fill that we're going to do landward up to the existing, what's remaining of that marsh fringe. As you can see from your field inspection, they lost about 15 feet of upland in one storm. Several trees, lots of vegetation. Dan told me that he actually planted all of that vegetation himself on those dunes that are there. I guess you call it a dune, it's a bump anyway. So what we're proposing to do, I got involved with Mr. Shabo first, and then the next door neighbor saw what we were doing, and he thought that it would be good for his property and also for Dan's property to install a similar breakwater. So that's where we are. We've had our field inspection, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Is there anyone on the board wishing to speak to this?
I want to thank you for working with the board on this.
Yes, sir. This is our third iteration of trying to get this to where everybody's in agreement that we're doing the right thing. We started with a revetment, which we took out, and then we had a riprap sill, which we took out because it was going to be so close to where the breakwaters are anyway that it didn't really make a lot of sense to include that. So we've taken all that out, and all that remains now are the breakwaters. And I appreciate y'all's patience in going back and looking at this a second time, but they really need to do something there because of the original breakwaters that were installed offshore. The gap breakwaters were installed incorrectly. The gaps are bigger than the breakwaters themselves. So we're trying to correct that. Both of these applicants have installed additional breakwaters on their own. Those are the ones that you could see that were halfway in between the offshore and the inshore. So now this will be the second time that they've installed a breakwater. But I feel like based on the storm damage that they got in the last storm, they need to do something. And they're both in agreement that this is probably the best way to go. These will be fairly large structures, 500 to 1,500 pound stones, and 18 feet wide, so I think that'll hold them for a while, hopefully.
Yeah, removing of that revetment got us out of a gray legal area with the dunes, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
I said removing the revetment got us out of a legal gray area with the
Absolutely.
county, so
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
no, I appreciate the board's patience, and hopefully we'll get through this.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Brian, could have these two projects been handled with a single application?
Yes, yeah. They could have been one, you could even do 4 or 5 property owners together.
Okay. And Roger, we were on site Tuesday, you mentioned the landowner's, Mr. Shivo's desire for that bend that we talked about. Is there any engineering justification for that, or just his desire?
I think based on his experience at the site, having lived through several storms there and seeing how the wave action works around the existing breakwaters, he said he felt like this was probably, in his opinion, the best way to protect the remaining property that he has there.
And then lastly, for Mr. Woodward and Mr. Barnes, do you have any concerns with that design?
I do not.
Ryan?
No, I think the Corps, and Mr. McKinley probably knows this, the Corps may weigh in on the gap a little bit.
Sure. And we can adjust that
Yeah.
as needed.
But I think a 20-foot gap is better than a 6-foot gap for sure, from the Corps' perspective. I'm not going to speak for them, but yeah, I don't have any major concerns.
Thank you.
If I can expand, it would appear to me from the revisions that you've taken all impacts out of the intertidal zone completely, except sand.
That's right.
And sand on a beach is exempt under the Wetlands Act, or Beaches Act. So I don't know if you all, no offense, have anything to authorize here.
Well, it looks like to me the mean low water is, the rock is inside the mean low water.
Just one corner, yeah, there's a little bit of a corner, and,
If Mr. McKinley's drawing's accurate, there's a,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stones. You're right.
you're right, it's 15 or so square feet, but it's still there, and
Well,
we're here,
and
so let's vote on it.
on Bikema, clearly it's channelward of low water, but, anyway, I don't have any concern over the design.
Anyone else on the board? Brian, do you have any comments?
No, ma'am.
And Jay?
Uh,
You just
Just
spoke.
my comment. VMRC needs to issue a permit.
Well, if there's no further comments, I ask for a motion, please.
I move that the project be approved as it's revised.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Okay, 5-0. Okay. Okay, the next on the agenda is
Thank you.
Matthew,
Like him.
okay. One thing I failed to do, I failed on the last one to read the advertisement from the papers, but I apologize for that. But state your name for the record, please.
It's Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive in Heathville, Virginia, representing this case also.
Okay, the ad in the paper reads, Matthew, whatever you say, he was requesting permission to install a 50 linear riprap sill and 158-foot linear foot breakwater along the shoreline of the Chesapeake Bay off Virginia State Highway 695, Windmill Point Road on Windfall Lane, tax map number 41, dash 1F BMRC number 210301. Go ahead, please.
Yes, and as I stated before, we've removed the riprap sill, so that now the only thing we're dealing with is the 58-foot long proposed breakwater and the sand fill on it.
Okay. Is that all you,
Yeah, I'd be glad to answer any more questions. I thought.
anyone on the board having any?
No.
Roger, what access do you anticipate for both of these, last project and this one?
As you remember, when we left the parking lot, we walked over a pathway that leads to the beach. There's a similar one over on Dan Chabot's property, and both of those have been used when the last two breakwaters were constructed. And they have a rubber tire skid steer loader that they'll be bringing the rock out. This is easier to get to than the last ones because it's closer to shore, but that'll be the access.
Okay, thank
They'll
you.
have a staging area somewhere up on the upland.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the board have any concerns? Brian, do you have any?
No, indeed.
Jay,
No, ma'am.
is it anyone in the audience wish to speak to this application? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll approve with revisions as submitted.
I'll second.
All in favor, signify. Okay, 5-0.
Thank you all.
All righty. Next applicant, on here, you have indicated that it is tabled. Now, are we just gonna,
I
Ask-
would, if I were you, I would read that into the record that at the request of the applicant to staff, the Mary Ann Sink project has been tabled. to
Mr. McKinley is the,
This agent for that
okay.
one, yeah.
Mr.
That way, if
McKinley,
anybody who's interested in that project, who might be listening in online.
would you come to the podium? Mr. McKinley, according to what I have in front of me, you have requested that Mary Ann Sink's application be tabled, is that correct?
That is correct. Based
Okay.
on site inspection, and I want to take another look at it and see if we can maybe figure out how to do a living shoreline. So anyway, I've asked that to have some time to really do a thorough look at it. We'll try to hear it next month. If
Well,
that's-
we appreciate your concerns and,
Ms.
So-
Revere, I'll make a motion to honor Mr. McKinley's request to table.
that's
Thank
what
you.
I was gonna ask. Okay, so tabled as requested.
We need a second and a vote.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All in favor? 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure for the record that the record showed that White was tabled. The next on the agenda is Harry Parsons. Is someone here representing him, please?
Yes,
State-
Joseph Scott, P.O. Box 315, Comark, Virginia 22482.
Okay. Mr. Parson is requesting permission to construct a 60 linear foot riprap revetment along the shoreline of the western branch of Peritone River, located off Virginia State Highway 611 Hoe Cake Road off Browns Lane. Tax map number 21-34, VMRC number 21-0326. Go ahead.
So this project is along a large parcel that has a lot of waterfront. In this particular section, they're going to install a pier, which is also included on this permit, but, you know, we're not hearing that here because that's not within the jurisdiction of the board. They're looking to, Mr. Parsons looking to stabilize this 60-foot section of shoreline to try to have access down to that pier. Originally, there was no, which this too is, I guess, not within y'all's jurisdiction, but I think it's worth mentioning because we did talk about on site originally, there was no grading plan for this, but the bank continues to fail. So at some point, there's going to have to be, we're going to have to make the WQIA change that their grading will be included. And then stone placed at the bottom and try to hopefully stabilize this section that seems to be washing out so that they can have access to the dock that they're going to build down there. If you guys have any questions.
Okay, does anyone on the board have concerns with this? Brian?
You got
Jay?
No, it's all above the low water line, no jurisdiction for me.
Is any-
Question. Jay, does this consistent with changes in living shoreline requirements?
I'd rather not say. It looks to me to be above mean high water line. Question, if this is a non-vegetated wetland, then it really isn't even in your jurisdiction. I looked at it. I don't think I would call that a beach. I think I would call that a non-vegetated wetland. So, as shown, it doesn't appear to be in jurisdictional wetlands.
And Joey, what's the slope you got on the revetment?
1.5 to 1.
And also, just to confirm, everything's happening on the revetment by water, barge?
Yeah, a good chunk of it should be able to be done from that area, but of course the grading, now that the grading will have to be added, there's probably going to be some need for access up top, but it's cleared through there enough that I think they can get a small piece of equipment to do what they need to do in that particular section. And in regards to the living shoreline aspect of it, I mean, this is a tall failed bank. I mean, we're talking a 16 to 20-foot bank. In order to get something that would really provide the stabilization needed at this particular site. It's really not as much of an erosion issue per se as it's a stabilization issue. So that's kind of why we went the route we did with that. I don't know that I can incorporate any sort of living shoreline to give the bank the stabilization it needs without doing a significant amount of alteration to the 100-foot RPA area, which we've already seen down at that site. They already have one RPA issue. I don't think Mr. Parson wants any more if he can avoid it.
I appreciate you also, on your site plans, showing the SAV and
Yeah, we have
oyster
to,
beds and those things we have to consider also. Thank you.
Is it anyone else? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this? If not, I'll entertain a motion, please.
I move to approve the application as submitted.
Second.
That- All in favor, signify by raising. Okay, 5-0.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is that of Charles A. Pritchett Jr. Someone here to represent him?
Yes, Judge Scott, P.O. Box 315, Kilmark, Virginia 22482.
Okay, Mr. Pritchett's requesting permission to repair 190 linear foot of riprap revetment and resurface 170 linear feet of riprap with 80 linear feet extended. 2-foot channel wood along the shoreline of Carter Creek, located off Virginia State Highway 200 Irvington Road on Glebe Road, tax map number 27-218C, VMRC number 21-0350. Go ahead.
So again, this particular site, there's a failing retaining wall there, and the applicant had looked into a couple of different options in trying to repair that and fix it so that it would, would not continue to fail with the bank that's behind it. This is another project that has a very high bank. Of course, the house is located within the 100-foot because it's an older house and an older footprint, and that could be contributing to some of the issues. So the contractor is hoping to be able to add stone to the front of that, in front of that retaining wall, and carry the height up to the top of the retaining wall over top of the existing revetment that's in front of the bulkhead that is there. So the main reason for that is to actually try to provide stabilization against the base of that retaining wall. And then while they're there, they might as well go ahead and straighten up and fix up the rest of the ripraps there. I'm not even sure that that's actually going to be done, but we put it on the permit just in case, because that's usually what happens. People see new, nice stacked riprap, and they're like, well, what about this over here? We should have fixed that. So there are no new impacts. We're putting rock on top of rock in the intertidal area. So if you have any questions. It needs a VMRC permit too, because that's the biggest impact is subaqueous with the new addition.
Anyone on the board have any concerns?
I just want to thank Joey for encouraging the landowner to continue to try to revegetate and establish vegetation above this area. And I would ask Brian, have we received any input from town of Irvington since this project does touch their jurisdiction?
Yeah, Hannah let them know, and we haven't heard from the Lancaster.
Well, I guess we would have to assume that they have no concerns.
This job too will be done by barge too. There's no way they can access anything there. So.
Brian, do you have anything you want?
No.
Jay?
Like Joey said, the majority of the impacts, the majority of the new impacts are channeled of low water. Intertidal riprap is a community type according to the old wetlands guidelines, which will segue into some discussion on the wetlands guidelines later. But, a living shoreline's not appropriate here. This is a reasonable fix for where they are.
So do you have any concerns, Jay? On this, as applied, do you have any concerns?
No.
Is anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this? If not, a motion, please.
Also move.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Also move.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Motion to approve. Thank you. The next on the agenda is Philip Spotswood.
Good morning. Roger McKinley, 691 Mill Point Drive, Eastville, Virginia, 22473. Mr. Spotswood is...
I need to read this,
Oh,
please.
go for it.
Mr. Spotswood is requesting permission to construct 66 linear feet of riprap revetment along the shoreline of Mire Creek, located off Virginia State Highway 668 Mire Creek Road on Purdom Lane. Tax map number 26-125A, VMRC number 21-0531. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Spotswood owns pretty much all the property all the way around this cove. And over a period of almost 3 years now, we have applied for and received permission to construct small sections of riprap revetment all the way around the cove, including the head of the cove. The adjacent property owner on the opposite side of the cove has riprap revetment already in place, and what we're applying for will tie into existing riprap on both ends, one on Mr. Spotswood's property and the other on the adjoining property owner's land, where the riprap already exists. The trees and vegetation there are growing right down to the edge of the eroding scarp. So this has been proposed that there'll be a staging area. The rock will be placed on a small float, and it'll be pulled out to where it'll be hand stacked on filter cloth up against this eroding bank for 66 feet. No impacts to the upland. There's no vegetated wetlands there, so there'll be no impacts to that as well. As they bring the rock over, it's already a riprap revetment in that area, so there won't be any impacts in that area as well. So what he's trying to do, he and his wife are getting ready to retire down here. They live in Annapolis, and they just feel comfortable having that last section protected and taken care of, because he's been after me for some time to try to get this last little piece done. So that's what we're after, is the comfortability level that they have, so they're not going to lose any more trees. There's one tree that's actually growing in the area where the rock will go, and then there's another laying parallel that's going to have to be removed, but that's what we want to do. And we were on site and looked at it, and we talked about access and floating it out there and how that's going to be done. So I'd be glad to answer any other questions you may have.
Anyone on the board have any concerns?
Nope.
You, Brian?
No, we're, as you all know, we're under pending new guidelines, and traditionally, this board has approved the undercut forested banks where it's shady and dark and adjacent waters are kind of deep. We've always approved some of these hand-laid kind of riprap revetments. It's tough to see a living shoreline solution in this area. The area is very narrow and doesn't receive a lot of immediate boat wakes and things like that, but at the same time, a living shoreline solution would have to be 20 feet wide or wider to really be effective with the size of the bank behind it. And doing that in this area might restrict the cove. That's not an easy decision to make, so.
We certainly looked at that. There's a narrative that I included with this, because
And
we
it's
met.
very shady.
Oh, it is.
I
And we
mean,
met out on
it's like
site.
far as grass growing, it's
There's none.
just,
We had the contractor and the homeowner and his wife and myself, and we talked about that. But I think if you did a riprap seal, it'd be a third or halfway across the cove. And then it's, the matter of trying to bring in sand by hand, and doing all that, which is the same issue we have with Marianne Sink. That's going to be a barge job also, all stacked by hand. So we'll have to see how we deal with that one. But this one, I think, would finish it up, and then they'll rest easy as they get ready to move down here and relocate.
Jay, do you have anything you'd like to
I
add?
don't have any comment.
Anyone in the audience have anything they'd like to say? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the plan specifications as submitted.
Thank you.
Second? Who second? Oh, okay. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know they'll be tickled.
Okay. Is there any other business?
Minutes.
Hmm?
Minutes.
I'm sorry.
Minutes.
I know, but you gotta go one by one. You gotta go step by step.
Edna, a couple months ago, Roger McKinley brought up something to the board about in lieu fee, and I'd just like to have a little open discussion. Is that something the board wants to look at, examine? Otherwise, it's an open item as requested by Mr. McKinley, and I guess also Jay was going to do some research for us on other counties and which counties and how much they charge, since the range seems to be all over the board from $1 to $100 a square foot. So do we want to pursue that or not?
What do you think? No?
I don't know.
Ron, what do you think? You and Hannah?
I don't know, I'll let Hannah speak for herself if she wants, but I really don't know what you should do on that, especially given that the guidelines are getting ready to change, or in the process of changing. We're trying to, I think the in lieu fees in a way were geared towards getting an applicant to pay for unavoidable impacts. Now that we're trying to just completely omit that kind of work, and it's either living shoreline or maybe revetments in places like the Pritchard situation where it's already there and it just needs tweaking. It's difficult to predict what we'll need in the future. On one hand, as staff, it would be nice to have that option for some projects. However, it's just like wetland mitigation. I think we've all seen that be abused in the country generally, where there's lots of places where the highway could have gone in a different spot or this or that. And instead, they just use mitigation as a way to, no, we want this parking lot in this swamp. So that's something that I don't know if you guys will be able to figure that out today.
I think that was going to be my suggestion is if it's questionable about things changing, perhaps we need to table all of this or wait until the changes have been made and look at the changes and go from there as to what, we can do. Bruce, do you?
Well, I guess, the state law permits in lieu fee. In lieu fee's been around a long time. Brian, I think I'm correct in you saying that this would require a new ordinance, or at least a modification to our existing ordinance. But, there's places in this county, and let me start out by saying I'm against it. Because I think it's a rich man's solution. And if I got enough money, I can destroy all the wetlands I want. I don't care what you charge me. If I want to put a boat ramp in, if I want to do anything, and it's $1,000 a square foot, we've got people, Jay knows them, go ahead, send me a bill, I'll pay it. So that's my concern, that it allows people, if it's not appropriately administered, I can destroy all the wetlands I want. All I got to do is write you a check for $1 an acre, and I'll do it. However, on the other hand, it's a tool that we don't have. And there's sometimes where when you go through the sequencing process, avoidance, can we avoid it? Can we mitigate for it? Can we change the project design? Sometimes the answer is no, 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 no. Well, what are we going to do? Let the resource continue to degrade? Let the property continue to erode? Let the house or structure, whatever. So it's another tool. I'm not sure we're going to see hundreds of these, but it does bother me that because I'm a rich guy, or a rich guy applicant can buy his destruction property. So I just don't want to let that. I just don't want to let a request, at some point, we need to act on this, up or down.
Hit your mic button.
You can turn it back on now.
When they remodel, all the remodeling is
Yeah, that's right. The varnish is so shiny, it's causing.
The reason I brought this up.
Please, state your name.
Sure. This in lieu fee thing is available in almost all the adjoining counties to Lancaster County. And as Bruce has intimated, the fees vary all over the place. But there are circumstances where it's not feasible for the landowner to have a mitigation site on the property. And I know in other areas, they have a mitigation bank. You can actually pay money and buy grass in a mitigation bank. But the in lieu fees, which I've used, Middlesex County, Matthews County, Westmoreland County, enable a certain intrusion, like a boat ramp, into the water where the property itself is located in an area that's miles and miles and miles from a boat ramp. They're on a beautiful creek for small, trailerable boats where they could launch the boat themselves on the property. Anyway, there are circumstances. I don't think there's a lot. I don't think you all get very many requests for boat ramps, but that's the reason that I brought it up. And I have a sample of Middlesex County and what they've done and their fees and so forth, and I've dealt with it in Westmoreland and Matthews. So that's the reason I brought it up. I certainly understand your point that if I'm, money is no object, but I think that that's going to be up to the discretion of the board when you see this project come before you. And the one that I'm thinking about in particular is 40 square feet that I'm dealing with. It could be more on another project, it could be less. But I think that that's where the check comes, that if you, after looking at the site, determine that, well, they can move this over here and avoid those impacts, or it's possible that maybe they could do a mitigation site here. I mean, there are lots of variables, but it will be up to you to look at the situation and say, well, I don't care how much money he's got, this isn't gonna work, he can do it somewhere else. Or, this seems feasible, it's a reasonable location for what they're trying to do, it's the only site that's available to them, there's nowhere they can mitigate, and so I think that if you would at least consider having it available to the homeowners in the county to be able to do certain things with their land, I think it would certainly be an asset. And other counties have felt the same way. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Jay or Brian, are there any wetland mitigation banks in the Rappahannock River watershed?
I don't think there's a title bank, TIDAL. I would have to look into it, and I apologize, I don't have the data on what all the other counties are doing, but, yes, it's a tool. Yes, it's a tool that allows you guys a little bit more flexibility in managing it, but if you were to establish an in lieu fee through, I guess, the board of supervisors, how would you do that in your ordinance? Now, some money comes in, and somebody, staff or whomever, is gonna manage that money. In a perfect world, an opportunity would come up where some wetlands could be bought on a lot for the county, because it's county funds. And now you've sort of started your own little mitigation bank, if you will. Not really a bank, but short of that, you've got this pile of money. And what are you going to do with it? Are you actually going to go out and plant grass? Are you going to hire somebody to plant grass? Where are you going to do it? I wish I had an opinion on it. Part of me says I'm glad you guys don't have it, because it's one more thing to keep track of and make sure it's implemented right. The other side of me says there's going to be some unavoidable, like you said, the sequencing. Avoid. We've avoided all we can. We've minimized. We've reduced it as much as we can. Mitigate. Mitigate takes many forms. compensate is the, in-kind creation of. So I think without that tool, you're sort of forced to get down to where, yes, these impacts were permitted, and there was nothing, the ends justified the means in a manner consistent with the preservation of, it doesn't say no net loss anywhere in here. That's the whole, I'm ranting, the non-tidal wetland banks that was no net loss, and it's 1.5 to 1, or, palustrine, emergent, all the different types of non-tidal wetlands. Well, look what that opened up. But, it's created some banks. But that was because of no net loss to federal wetlands. There is no, as far as I know, the state law isn't no net loss. It's a good direction to go, but.
Well, I do know that there's been some really successful wetland mitigation banks that do not involve governmental jurisdiction. It involves nonprofits, land conservancies, Ducks Unlimited, and those kinds where the bank is there, and that's, of course, recognized by the county jurisdiction.
Right.
Where we probably don't need, Brian, any more things to manage in this county. But those have been successful.
Well, and again, you asked about the Rappahannock River watershed, because it's always, in that hydrologic unit code or an adjacent hydrologic unit code, that all goes back to the non-tidal, when they developed that. We use that as a model. But in Hampton Roads, you've got the Elizabeth River Project, you got the Bay Foundation, you've got operations that are buying land, and they're doing stuff that ostensibly the county could then say, well, add this to your.
Well, while we deal primarily with individual private landowners.
I know.
Do those in lieu fee projects, those municipalities allow for commercial in lieu fee, like Walmart? A business, can they do the same thing in those counties that do have in lieu fee? Any landowner, can any landowner participate in lieu fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where they have it.
Yeah.
I believe. I don't think it's just commercial. I think it's
Anybody?
by impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think what we could do, Hannah and I could do for you guys, perhaps before your next meeting,
You
is
got anything to
just.
offer? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't have.
Come up with just a little compendium of some surrounding counties and what they do, what they charge, whether they do or don't. I think VIMS has done most of that work for us. They have a list of those things.
Yeah.
And then give you guys an idea of what that might look at for further discussion. One thing that did occur to me while you guys have been discussing this is that one of the stated goals of the comprehensive plan is to increase public access to the water in this county. There are, as you look at potential public access sites, there are sites that do have potential public access but have no room to mitigate on site, and those are this kind of procedure, having that available could make that more palatable, because the county should be playing by its own rules. If you run into a situation where you can't avoid, the county could set aside that same amount of money in its fund for wetland restoration enhancement on other public-owned property. That's one thought. Another is that you could, when you, and like you all know, we tried to revise our wetland ordinance, and I think we're going to try it again in maybe 6 months or a year. Once these guidelines are done, then we'll have a better feel for how we need to revise our wetlands ordinance. You could put some language into that ordinance that guides the use of that wetland in lieu fee policy, that gives it a matrix like Jay just alluded to, very strictly. Did they avoid, did they do this? Kind of a legal check, if you will, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If they have, okay, then 5, then let them use that in lieu fee. But it's just kind of some, I call them bumpers, if you will. A lot of law and ordinance is all about just bumpers. People think it's really strict. Sometimes it's not as strict as you think, but I think that would be a good idea to do that all at once. If you do want to do the in lieu fees, when we go back to the ordinance revision, it would be in there, and then boom, 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 you'd have it all ready. So either way, I think we need to do some more research, and we'll try to help you with that before your next meeting.
Do you Does anyone know, Brian, you guys collect funds for violations. Do you know, whatever that pot of money is and wherever that resides, you know, again, ostensibly goes to wetland protection mitigation? Are you buying monitors for the Wetlands Board? I mean, it's very flexible. But again, if there's an established pot that the county is used to having, we talked about this many years ago, sooner or later, it's enough to say, you know what? We can buy that little acre down there that people have been talking about. They do what's called a land bank up in Massachusetts. If you buy a piece of property, there's a tax that goes on that purchase, goes to the town goes out and buys open land, and that becomes land bank property. It's kind of an English type of idea, but, you know, as long as you're creating something that you're going to use that's going to help you and not creating something that's going to be there to cause you pain.
Yeah, you're right. We do have that fund. This board, many of the folks who are on the board now have expended that fund, especially for the wetland educational efforts we did.
Right.
A lot of that was
It's very-
heavily paid for by this
It's
board.
very flexible. Yeah, it's not just,
Fund.
it's
And I
not,
think that was a good use of that money. There's quite a decent chunk in there now, and we've been holding that back in anticipation of being able to do some more waterfront work on some county-owned beach and
Perfect.
waterfront that just hasn't quite materialized yet. But yeah, the time is coming where we need to do something with that money.
Ron, we did that project, you know, at Belle Isle.
Yeah, the Belle Isle State Park project,
Is
yep.
there something there? Because that's public.
there are some opportunities, but
But what I'm saying is there something else down there that they might really need, like
There will be
shoreline
coming up, yes,
protection,
ma'am. Yep.
like we did down near the piers.
Mhm.
To the left of that pier is what we established, to the right of the other pier is nature. And Roger, I believe, drew the plans. for
I also
the
did the
whole
work.
project. Huh?
I volunteered the work to install it. The county
Well, what
paid
I'm
for the
saying
rock,
is
and
he
we installed
helped us, he helped us, you know, with all the drawings and all, and
I remember that,
of course, we got together and we ordered the plants, and you have to be ready when they come in to go and set them. You can't put them aside for a week or whatever, if you don't set them, forget it.
Yeah.
And
I'll off,
If you guys want, we'll look into that for you and try to have you.
Well, I think it would be a good
little
idea.
report
I
on
was
that.
thinking about those funds the other day, and I thought, now, wait a minute, because it's in a separate fund from the county, it's in a wetland fund. It's in a wetland fund. So,
and as a segue, I'll just offer up, VDOT got a permit to do a breakwater beach job up at Bel Isle. And it's ongoing. I think they've actually broken ground, and it's a public park, and it might be a fun project to go out and look at, but I know the contractor who's going to be doing the planting work, but, you know, in that case, that's a state park. It would be awful nice to contribute money to the state park, but if I were you, I'd keep it in the county and let the state pay for
I
the
was
state park.
thinking, well, with the way the school systems are now, virtually and whatever have you, I was thinking at one point, when everything was good, that we could represent and send some students that might be interested in environmental scientists to, you know,
Mhm.
but of course that never mounted to anything in it. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the original.
I'm going to do something now that we've started doing with some of the other boards and commissions, rather than staff going out and cowboying on our own. If y'all would make a motion to direct staff to research in lieu fees and what that program would look like for you all, would you please do that? That way, we just have something on paper that says, hey, why are you and Hannah spending a couple hours doing this? Oh, well, the board said they wanted this done, so. If
Well,
you don't
what-
mind doing that,
What do you want in the wording of the motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll make a motion
Bruce
to, hopefully, sorry I extended this discussion so long. Got to be careful when you call on Jay Woodward. But, because he usually says, I have nothing to say, and then 5 minutes later, he's still going.
But I'll elaborate on that.
So I'll make a motion that staff's directed to provide us a discussion paper and maybe even a decision, a recommendation on exploring in lieu fees and the science behind these fees, which I don't think there are any, but that we could pursue and discuss and to see if that's something we want to pursue as a tool for wetland protection.
second? The motion? Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Okay, thank you. Well now, are we through with, can we go to the minutes so we can go home?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as set out.
Motion, all five to approved. Okay, the meeting is adjourned, and the next meeting will be June the 10th, 2021. You probably need to sign them.